Hey guys, welcome to Mad Scientist BBQ. I'm Jeremy Yoder, and today we're going to talk about brisket prices and hopefully find an alternative that's going to taste just as good and save you a whole bunch of money. So for me, the issue of brisket prices has been something I've been thinking about for a long time because I've been cooking brisket for a while, and I've noticed that the brisket price has kind of steadily gone up. It kind of ebbs and flows with the seasons, but then when the pandemic hit, brisket prices have seemingly gone through the roof. So at Costco, briskets were about $100 a piece the other day, and I thought, this is crazy. Who's going to spend $100 to buy a brisket? I mean, if you really need one, then maybe it makes sense. But the whole point of barbecue in the first place was to use cheap cuts of meat. So the idea was you use cheap, undesirable cuts of meat, you cook them for a long time to make them tender and smoky, and then you have a great product at the end. But most people didn't want to put in all that work, so the cost of the meat was cheap. So what I'm going to try to do is find cheaper alternatives to what have now become very popular barbecue items and see what we can make at a low cost. So the first step in that process is to find a brisket alternative, and today I'm trying out chuck roast. I've done some of these in the past, they've turned out really good, but I'm going to do a blind head-to-head taste test at the end of this. And fortunately for us, Porter Road has sponsored this video, so I have a brisket here from them and a chuck roast, and I know that they're both going to be of great quality, and they're going to be produced by the same people, so it's really a fair comparison. All right, the sun was kind of blinding me there, so I moved over here. But let me give you the breakdown of how we're going to approach this. So I'm going to use only salt and pepper because I want to taste the flavor of the meat, because I want to get a good sense of what the underlying meat is like. I don't really care so much about the seasoning because you can change the seasoning according to your own preferences. Secondly, I am cooking these on the Traeger pellet smoker today. So I've been working on trying to figure out exactly what method I think is best to use with pellet smokers, what kind of pellets are best. I have multiple kinds over here. So this is part of the process of me testing. The thing that's important here though is that we're using the same pellets and the exact same method for both the brisket and the chuck roast. And so I'm going to use some of the same tricks that I usually use in an offset smoker. I'll be using smoked tallow, wrapping in butcher paper, all that stuff. But temperatures and pellets and things like that are going to be forthcoming in a future video. So at this point, we're going to take both pieces of meat out of the package, get them ready for the smoker, season them up with your salt and pepper, put them on the smoker. All right, just for reference, this is the chuck roast. You see that there's intramuscular marbling there, but there's not a big fat cap on the outside. Whereas here we have a brisket. It has intramuscular marbling in some places and a fat cap on the top side, which made it really good for barbecue. Now, this is obviously much bigger than this. And the issue that a lot of people face is they go and spend $100 for a brisket, and then they make it for their family, and then they have a bunch of leftovers that they have to freeze, and they really are buying more meat than they need. So if you can get the same or better results with a chuck roast, this makes a lot more sense for most people. Porter Road dry aged chuck roast. All their meat's dry aged. Cool thing about this is I'm not really gonna have to do any trimming. Just season, put it on, no waste. See the intramuscular marbling? That's what we're looking for. You see that intramuscular marbling is what's going to keep this thing moist even though it doesn't have a fat cap, or at least we're going to find out if it does. With these Porter Road briskets, they already come pretty much trimmed the way you need. I'm just going to take a little bit off, season it up, get it on. It's been several hours at this point, so let's check in on the chuck roast and brisket and see how they're doing. I'm just going to let you know, I already took a peek and they're starting to look really nice. So there's a deep red color and they're starting to form up that bark. That's really hard to get on some pellet smokers, but I think we're going to get it today. The rest of the way for this cook, it's going to be my standard procedure. So I'm going to use the Wagyu beef tallow. Check out my how to smoke a brisket video if you're curious about it, but it's really good stuff. So I'm going to put the butcher paper down, put the meat down, and then kind of soak it in smoked beef tallow. So you get the smoke flavor, you get the extra moisture. It's an amazing thing. But it's going to be wrapped up in butcher paper, both the chuck roast and the brisket. We're just going to finish them off until they're tender. So somewhere around 200 degrees, maybe as high as 205. But when I wrap is just going to be determined by the color and the bark on the outside of those pieces of meat. Like I mentioned, the cost of brisket is absolutely sky high right now. It's astoundingly expensive. And so a huge thank you to today's sponsor, Porter Road. They sent me that brisket and that chuck roast to do this test, and I've been using them for years. If you guys look back at some of my old videos, I've been using Porter Road stuff and have been a big fan for a long time. What they do is they try to recreate the experience of actually knowing your butcher. Because at supermarkets, a lot of times you only have a few standard cuts, there's not a huge selection, but at Porter Road, they process the animals and do a lot of really neat and interesting stuff that you're not gonna find at your local grocery store. So back in the day, you could go to your butcher and say, hey, you know what, I'd really like this cut, and they could cut it for you. And Porter Road tries to bring that to everybody through the convenience of being shipped to your door. They have a number of unique characteristics that I really like. Number one, they work with local farmers. They do a lot of stuff in Western Kentucky where I grew up, and then also in Tennessee. It's just a really cool thing to see small-time farmers able to do what people have been doing for generations and produce high-quality beef, and that comes to you as a consumer. Also, they dry age the beef as a hanging carcass. So you get dry aged flavor without having to lose a lot of the beef by cutting off stuff that's hard and crusty on the outside, and it's not so overpowering that it's off-putting. It's basically a concentrated beef flavor with an added richness that you only get from hanging the carcass and aging. I've been a fan of their briskets for a long time, but today I'm gonna find out if I'm an equally big fan of their chuck roast. I know that everything that I've tried from them has been really good, the pork and the beef, so I'd encourage you guys to check it out. I'm gonna put a link in the description, and you're gonna get a discount of 15% off. In addition to the 15% off, any orders over $100 ship for free. So you get cuts that you might not find locally, you get something that's of top-notch quality, it's dry aged, packed with flavor, and you get 15% off. And if you spend over $100, you get free shipping. This is 100% worth your time. Okay guys, it's been a very long day and my daughter's asleep so I can't be loud, but here we have our finished brisket and our finished chuck roast. Just from observation, it looks like the chuck roast has maybe a little bit better bark, and what I'm really wondering is maybe it has more smoke flavor, especially when you have something like a pellet grill where the smoke flavor is a little bit limited. So you guys have seen me cook a bunch of briskets. You guys have seen me slice into a bunch of briskets, so we're not gonna really focus on that. But I think this is the first chuck roast I've cooked on camera, so we're gonna focus on that and see what that one looks like. But first, I'm gonna slice the brisket. Let's take a quick look at that, and then we'll hone in on this chuck roast, and then a blind taste test. Side note on my progress with pellet smoker brisket is I've gotten the juiciness that I want, so that's great. I'm still working on getting the perfect bark. What temperature, for how long, what kind of pellets, all that stuff. So as soon as I know, I'll let you guys know. Fat rendered pretty well through there, obviously extremely juicy. This one looked pretty good. Look at that smoke ring, which is about as thick and clear a smoke ring as you can get right there. Really happy with that. Okay, let's cut some chunks out. Alright, so my initial thoughts are good bark, just aesthetically a nice smoke ring, and it looks to be pretty juicy still. So there's connective tissue and stuff in here. I think it's making it juicy. This will be a candidate for the blind taste test. Then I'm gonna have to cut some chunks of the brisket, and I won't know what I'm eating, but I'll give you my honest feedback on this. Now, I love brisket, but if this is better and cheaper, I think for a while I might be switching to chuck roast or something like that, or maybe find some other alternative, because briskets are too darn expensive right now. It's pretty juicy for a flat. Can't complain about that. Jeez. Now for the blind taste test, I have these three piles. I have brisket point, brisket flat, and chuck roast, and I've told my wife which pile is which. I'm just gonna have my eyes closed. She's gonna hand them to me. I will taste them and give my thoughts. My guess is that there's going to be a little bit more smoke flavor on the chuck roast because it's a little thinner and you get bark all the way around. So that's a guess. I think the brisket point is going to be the juiciest. Brisket flat is going to be maybe the driest, but this one looks pretty darn juicy. Okay, sample number 1. It's actually really good. I would eat that again. My guess is chuck roast, because there was so much smoke flavor on there, and I could taste a lot of bark. That was really, really good. It's better than I thought it would be. Wow, I really like that. Oh, got one here. The aroma of barbecue never gets old. Very good. Less smoke flavor. That one was very good, but it seemed a little bit more pot roasty than barbecuey. The first sample was about as close as I've gotten to offset smoker flavor on a pellet smoker. I mean, just smoke flavor up front, really nice, really clean kind of tasting smoke flavor. Love that. That one tasted really, really good. The beef was at the forefront, but the smoke flavor kind of lingered behind. All right, so my guess on that one is brisket flat. Very juicy for a flat. Brisket point. As a man who's cooked many briskets and eaten many briskets, I hope I did not totally blow this. But let me give you my impressions of each sample, and then we're going to see if I'm right. First one, I thought it was chuck roast. Tremendous smoke flavor. Maybe because it's thinner, it has so much surface area for bark, so the surface area to the volume of the bite, you have tons of smoke flavor in there. It was wonderful. To be able to get that from a pellet grill is super nice. The second one, I'm pretty darn convinced it was brisket flat. It was very moist for a brisket flat. You get kind of the pot roasty flavor, something like that. Not as much smoke flavor. The smoke flavor is a little bit more in the background. And then with the third sample, I think it's brisket point. Again, I think it was smoke flavor kind of in the background. Very juicy, you know, very flavorful, rich in beefy flavor. But the smoke wasn't really, you know, at the forefront the way I would like. So sample 1, I would give smokiness a 9.7. Moisture and tenderness, I would give it a 9.3. It wasn't as moist as the other 2 samples. The second sample, for smoke flavor, I would give it maybe an 8.1, something like that. The smoke flavor that was there was good, but I really wish I could have had more. In terms of moisture and tenderness, I'd give it, you know, probably a 9.4, something like that. It's very, very good. The third sample, moisture and tenderness, I give that a 9.8. It was wonderful. And then the smoke flavor, probably the same as the other one. I believe it was an 8.1. Something where it's there, it's nice, it's good, you enjoy it, you want to keep eating more of it, but it's just not really at the forefront the way you want it to be. So those are my guesses. Sample 1, chuck. Sample 2, brisket flat. Sample 3, brisket point. All right.
Yeah, you're correct.
I got them right. It's pretty good smoke flavor for a pellet grill.
Yeah.
Not the same as an offset, but still pretty good. All right, I just had my wife try the 3 samples. She tasted them blind, and she couldn't tell the brisket from the chuck roast, but her favorite bite actually came from the brisket. So I think that we have 2 pieces of meat here that are kind of equivalent in quality, and you can treat them the same kind of way. Low and slow, build bark, build flavor on the outside, and then enjoy great barbecue. For me, what I would do is I would treat a chuck roast almost like a bunch of burnt ends. You could take it and cube them, sauce them like burnt ends, put them back on the smoker and glaze them. They would be like meat treats that everybody's gonna love. So I was actually really impressed with this chuck roast. It was juicier than I thought it was gonna be. My fear is that that surface area to volume ratio, which helps with smoke flavor, can also dry it out. So imagine if you had a brisket that was as thin as a piece of paper. Of course, you know, every bite would be almost nothing but smoke flavor, but it would also dry out. Now, the bigger and thicker the piece of meat, the less smoke flavor you have per ounce of that meat, but it also protects it from drying out. So I didn't know if this would be too small to survive a long cook like that and still be moist, but in this case, it absolutely can stay moist. So in the spirit of what barbecue originally was, finding cheaper cuts and then treating them right to make them delicious, I think chuck roast is a great option for you guys. So check it out. I am going to be cooking more chuck roasts in the future, and I want to try some things some different recipes using chuck roast and seeing what kind of possibilities there are there. Because each piece of meat deserves care and respect when cooking it. I am very impressed with the chuck roast. Check it out. If you guys have cooked chuck roast, let me know in the comments below because I want to know about your experience because I read those and try to take in as much information as possible to continue to learn for myself. I love to keep learning, and so when I do tests and experiments like this, I learn things from each of those experiences. Sometimes I give you guys videos where it's like, I've done this a ton of times. Let me tell you exactly how I do it and why. Sometimes it's, let's try this out. This was a, let's try it out, and I'm very pleasantly surprised. If you guys want to keep learning, check out the videos on the screen. Otherwise, you can subscribe to the channel, you can like this video, and you can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Mad Scientist BBQ. We'll see you guys next time.